Okay, I'm gonna go fast. Eli inspired me to start learning the Ramban again, who he said not to be confused with Rambam, and I learned Ramban last week and it was very helpful, and I learned Ramban again this week, thank you. So Ramban in his Nachmanides, 13th century Spanish commentator, in his introduction to the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, which we kind of finished reading today. He said, Be'inyan, that the book of Exodus, Be'inyan hagalut harishon uve'geula mimenu, that the entire book of Exodus is the story of our first exile and our redemption from that exile. That's what the book of Exodus is, according to Ramban. It's the story of exile and redemption. So that comment caught my attention because it's really not all that true if you think about it. The story of our slavery and redemption, that's 15 chapters of the book of Exodus. But there are two more parts to Exodus. There is the theophany at Mount Sinai. There's the Israelites at Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments, Torah, Revelation. That's chapters 16 to 24. And chapters 25 to 40 of the book of Exodus are almost entirely devoted to one topic only. And that topic is the Mishkan, the traveling tabernacle. Or if it works better for you to hear about it in this way, Parshiot Shemot va'era bo bishalach are about galut to geula, exile to redemption. Yitro and Mishpatim are about matan Torah, revelation and the receiving of Torah from God. And Truma, Titzave, Kitisa, Vayakel, and Pekude are all about the building of the tabernacle. It is not just a book about the story we tell on Passover. So here is what the Ramban says to reconcile what he knew to be quasi-true. He said, look, the exile was not complete. There was no such thing as redemption until the Israelites were restored to the status of their ancestors. Even after leaving Egypt, according to the Ramban, the exile remained in place. Ukeshebau el har Sinai ve'asu mishkan ve'shava kadosh baruch hu ve'hishra shchinato beinehem az shavu el ma'alot avotam. When the Israelites came to Mount Sinai and received Torah, when they received the directions for and then built the traveling tabernacle, the Mishkan, God once again settled among the Israelites and they were finally considered redeemed, which is to say, Ramban understands the redemption of the Israelites to not be God pulling the Israelites out of Egypt, but rather God giving the Israelites Torah and then a place for God to dwell amongst the camp, amongst the Israelites as they're traveling through the desert. So in fact, the entire book of Shemot, of Exodus, that we, again, finished-ish today, is a book about gnut l'shavach, degradation to elevation. And from Exodus on, this is the primary threefold way we tell our story. In each generation, in each location, after each dispersion and destruction, we do this Exodus dance. We create and recreate ourselves. We center Torah, reclaiming the covenant. Then we start building communities again in every place we've ever had to live. Search for redemption. It's the Shalosh Regalim. This same cycle, three-part cycle, are the three pilgrimage holidays. On Pesach, we reenact the slavery into the moment in which we are free from slavery. That we do at the table. On Shavuot, we recreate Mount Sinai, Matan Torah, the receiving of Torah. We reenact it by staying up all night, trying to sort of give the sense of you're at Sinai and everything's a little bit blurry and thunders and we're seeing sounds and hearing whatever it is that is said there. And Sukkot, the third pilgrimage holiday, We are, in fact, building our own little temples in the desert. This is our story: creation, revelation, redemption. We codify the Exodus story in experiential memory as we go. And the practices remain relevant because, sadly and happily sometimes, our story never changes, which is to say Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot never becomes irrelevant because the stories we are reenacting are always stories that are happening in some Jews present somewhere in history. The story of Sefer Shemot is not simply a freedom story. The story of Sefer Shemot is the story of Jewish essence. It's the story of a meaningful and purposeful Jewish sacred way of life in every era, every place, through every dispersion, disruption, diminishment, pogrom, catastrophe, war, and more, right up until yesterday in Michigan at Temple Israel, or this past week in Toronto where multiple synagogues were shot at, or in Amsterdam, or in the overpopulated bomb shelters in Israel. We keep reliving this story. We enter and we exit darkness. We identify and then re-identify as Jews, bound up together. No matter our differing beliefs and ideologies and ideals, we recommit to one another. This is actually really tricky work. We don't commit to one another all that well when we have different ideologies and beliefs and ideals, but we are meant to, and that is what happened at Mount Sinai, as if everybody believed the same thing about leaving Egypt. No chance. Then when we commit to one another, we build and we rebuild again, and we do it with purpose. And sadly now we rebuild with outsized resources devoted to building fortified institutions. But we build, and we build with redemption in mind. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. That's our story. The book of Exodus is the eternal story of the Jewish people. Don't expect it to change, but allow the Torah's version and our codification of that story in experiential practice to hold us. That's why we're here today. In a few weeks, the Haggadah is going to give us a set of words from the Torah 4 different times. V'higadata levincha bayom hahu lemor ba'avur zeh asa Adonai li b'tzeiti miMitzrayim. In Exodus 13, we are told, "You shall tell your children on this day, saying, 'It is because of this that God took me out of Egypt.'" The challenge is that it doesn't tell us what the "this" is in the Torah itself, and it is a source of a medieval debate. The Rashbam, that's Rashi's grandbaby, he says the ba'avor zeh means because of this. We do Passover because of the miracles that God performed on our behalf, which is to say, teach your children the story that led up to the moment. That's the middle of redemption. Rashi explains ba'avor zeh to mean not because of what happened, but for what will happen. Teach your children that God took us out of Egypt for a reason, and the reason God took us out of Egypt is to claim the Torah, is to actually take the blueprint that is in the Ark and then animated throughout Jewish history, the guide to how we might meaningfully capture the same story over and over and over again. Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot, they are never irrelevant if ba'avor zeh, on account of them, we understand why we came to be in the first place. And that's this week's prescription, at least in my mind. As we finish the book of Exile and Redemption, as we live it all over the world as Jews, once again, along with all kinds of other peoples who have to live their own version, each unique, the prescription is to keep nestling up right up into here. Get in, to know that light always follows darkness. Every single morning is a reminder that there is another redemption still possible. especially when it feels impossible. The description is the book of Exodus. The prescription is figuring out how to reenact it in our own time. The Torah waits. Shabbat Shalom.